Hey, Laura.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks.
I'm just gonna close the door because I looked early because my computer was timing out on me, and I
Okay.
missed the meeting as I missed the other one the other day at 9 o'clock because I was working with papers. It went dark, and I missed it.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm not complaining.
No, it doesn't help you anyway, does it? Did you stay at the office for this meeting, or did you go home?
I decided to zip home and just get a little snack. I was a
Yeah.
little bit peckish, so I figured that
Okay.
might be a little bit easier.
Yeah. Fair enough. Elizabeth was busy with her emails today.
Yes, I thought I would just sit on those and let her kind of percolate for a second. Because the first one, I wasn't really sure what what we want to do with that. And then the second one with the parking issue is just, it seems to be standard. But I actually did want to check with you on the parking issue because the original email came almost a month ago and I hadn't seen it until today.
Oh, really? I
looked
didn't,
through
I
them.
didn't scroll down through the whole thing. So who received the original one?
Just check now. It does not say, but it does say that it was sent on March 19th. And I did a check of a search of the woman's name in my email, and there's nothing
There's
from
nothing.
her.
I wonder if that was, her reaching out to somebody at the city first, even back then.
I would assume so, but this is the first time I'm seeing it, so I just want to make sure that I'm
Yeah.
not hopping on it too quickly.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I get all the info first.
Well, and I have to watch because it's the demand for updates, right?
Mhm.
Like, do you need an update because you're going to communicate that back, or you just want to update on what we're doing? Because that's really not necessarily how the process should work. Diplomatic enough. It's been a long day. I'm not feeling so diplomatic today. Oh, yeah.
I will follow up with her on those two in the morning. So don't worry about those. It'll be fine.
Kim was just reaching out because she's going to log in. I'm assuming you sent her the link.
I did.
So she's just asking about what time would be best for her to log in. She can log in anytime after 5:30, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I assume that it would be quite soon after 5:30, honestly.
I would think so. And I wasn't sure what her availability was going to be like because she's doing her exam, except that the system at the university crashed.
Oh no.
Yeah, I know. So she called me and she said, I don't know if they're going to make us restart right away, because she said they might just add on an extra half an hour to the end of the exam, which would extend it to 6:30, or then she said they might reschedule it. And I said, well, if you can't come. So I reached out to Paul and I said she might not be able to make it. But she's just emailed me now to say that she can definitely make it. So obviously they've rescheduled.
Oh, good. What a day.
Yeah, I'd said to her, the only good thing about having that happen is that now she's answered all of the questions and she was working on the essay portion. So now she knows what the essay question is, so she can start to formulate a really fabulous response.
Silver lining.
You know, you got to look at it. You got to look at it from the positive lens, right? It's nothing else you can do. But I don't know how many people were impacted. I'm not sure how many people are in her course. So, yeah, I think it was probably overly optimistic to think that they were going to get the whole system up and running within 5 minutes. Hi, John.
Hello,
How are you, John?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad, thanks.
That's good.
I'm waiting with bated breath for the Premier's next announcement.
Oh, I heard they were going to be meeting today.
It's Thursday seems to be the day that the cabinet meets, and then they make these sort of last minute decisions that get everybody scrambling the next day. And at this point, there's not really much more we can do.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if they're going to, like he said, I mean, he always says this, but he says everything's on the table. So I'm wondering if they're actually contemplating things like curfews, like they're doing in Quebec.
Oh, wow. No, I don't think he'd ever go that way.
I would hope not.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think there's any value to that, and a complete waste of time for anybody who's trying to enforce a curfew, right? Like they have better things to do if you're going to leave that to police.
Right. Yeah.
And if nothing's open, there's nothing to go out for anyway.
Yeah, but there's still lots of stuff open. That's it.
Well, that's the
So-
problem is that everywhere
Yeah.
you go, like even today at lunch, I'm one of the offenders. I went out to go and get a coffee, and I just can't believe the amount of traffic. And then I'm kind of like, well, you're one of them too, Andrea. You're out
Yeah,
there.
well, absolutely. Yeah, it's
Yeah, no, I know.
not the same as last year this time where everything was shut down, right?
Yeah.
And people were off work, but people are, I mean, the definition of things that can be open or should be, or I guess is quite large.
It's probably, yeah, it's a little too large. And you think about even the difference between now and January with the original stay-at-home order. And I
Mhm.
mean, there was nothing open. Like now you can still go to the garden center and wander around and buy plants and stuff.
Oh,
And,
for sure. Yeah.
we haven't done that. But last year everything was shut. And I remember we ordered everything online to be delivered to the house from the garden centers. That was it. But now you can just go. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We're going to need to do something. I mean, like this will have because we've been in this now, stay at home for a week. So there will be some positive impact, but it's still going to be a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
And
Down the road. Yeah.
the numbers in the hospitals are just outrageous now.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
No, it's crazy.
it is. It is. Hi, Alyssa.
Hello,
How are you?
I'm good. That's all I'm hearing, all these
Oh.
conversations about COVID
I
and
know.
vaccine, and the whole day goes this way.
It's all right. You look like you're in California or somewhere nice. So
Oh, yes, that's where I am.
mentally, anyway.
Yes, that's where I want to be at least.
So
Today
John,
was hail and snow and pouring
Oh, no.
rain and
Yeah.
whatnot.
yeah. Is your area, John, impacted at all with the coming changes to the service areas? I guess not really, right? With,
Oh, do you mean with the
with the
restructuring?
restructuring at the city?
We're impacted because it's a lot of workload for us to make
Yeah.
all the changes, but yeah, not my work area is being impacted at all. So
Like, so staffing it, because that's going to be a big challenge too, right? Is the transition and the reporting structure
Exactly,
for some of the
yeah.
staff and the realignments. I guess that's part of
Yeah.
what you've been busy doing too, Rosanna, eh? Is some of the planning around that. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I was on a team trivia night the other night. Our team name was You're on Mute, so I'll
Oh.
get rid of that.
Hello, how's everyone?
that's funny. That was your team name.
It was, yeah. And we won.
Hi,
Oh,
sorry,
yay.
Hi.
I'm habitually late. My apologies. So I'll try to perform that. Welcome to our committee of the whole meeting. I'll start, I guess, and call the meeting to order. Completion and acceptance of the agenda. I don't know if there's anything else anyone would like to add to our committee meeting this afternoon. Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on then. Completion and acceptance of the agenda. Can I have a motion to accept the agenda then? Thank you, Ms. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Milson. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? It is carried. Minutes from the previous meeting. There are minutes that are attached. Are there any comments on the minutes? Seeing none, could I have a motion to accept? Thank you, Ms. Wilcox, seconded by Mr. Milson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Great, it's carried. All right, so that moves us into the first of the policy items that we have here. As I think everyone's probably read, there are a lot that have to do with board matters as we're preparing for the incoming board in the next few months. So I want to thank Ms. McKenzie and the team for working on all these matters over the last little while, and I'll turn things over to her.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair. As you indicated, we're bringing forward a group of policies tonight that really are anticipating the return to the community-based board in the coming months. And so in thinking about what that's going to look like, we've started to do some review of the board handbook And that in turn brings us to some of the policy pieces that need to be reviewed. So we are bringing these forward tonight for review, discussion, maybe some feedback for a few pieces, just to ensure that the policy pieces are going to be in place in advance of the start of the new board in the coming months. So the first one that we are bringing forward is the Code of Conduct. So the policy, if you want to have a look at this one, the policy statement really incorporates a lot of LMCH care values right into it, which may need to be adjusted in the coming months, right? Depending on what happens with the next iteration of the strategic plan. There may be some change or some compression of care values. I'm not sure that we'll keep the values at 8, but for the time period, we're going to leave this as is. But if you turn to page 4 of this document, we have made some updates specifically under the governance section. The third bullet you'll see is bold. That used to read a little bit differently. So we've changed some of the narrative there. The old language was that the board shall remove themselves from situations where their continued presence on the board may cause embarrassment to the corporation or undermine the confidence of their peers. So we've softened that language a little bit to what you see now. And then we've also updated on the next page, just under the section around media, to include the communications policy as well as the crisis communications policy, because those are new pieces that hadn't been included in this previously. That, as the board is aware, you've just approved those policies in the last few months. Those are the only substantive changes to this one. So I didn't know if anybody had an opportunity to take a look and to see if there are any issues or questions that you may have about the policy, or if you have anything that you'd like to highlight that we review in advance of bringing it forward for actual board approval.
Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. McKenzie. I did have a question about and actually it was one of the ones you just brought to our attention, the bullet under governance. I just found that new language a little bit awkward, and I wasn't sure what it meant. So directors may be advised on whether to continue. I was wondering, maybe advised by who, whose decision would this be? I think I understand now based on just your kind of introduction to that, but I was wondering if that could be clearer for a person reading it, just to know whose obligation it would be to either make that advisement, or whether a director would be expected to bring it to the attention of their peers. I'm interested in your thoughts on that language.
Through you, Chair, we can certainly, I can spend a bit more time sort of wordsmithing the language so it's a little bit clearer for everybody. I want it to be clear when anybody's reading it, right? When the new members that are coming on board are reading it as well. The intention would be that the directors would identify any kind of issues with through the chair, right? It would be up to the chair's discretion about whether or not they could continue in their role. That may have to be done in consultation with the rest of the board, but it would be the board chair's decision ultimately. I would suggest. So I can take that piece back and we can do a little bit more wordsmithing to make sure that it's a little bit clearer.
Further questions, comments? Ms. Wilcox.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Just a question about the policy statement under 4.0. I wondered if that consideration would be given to expanding that, or should it be expanded to directors are interacting with one another, members of the public, and with LMCH staff? I'm not sure if that's something that should be included there or not. I'd look for your feedback on that.
Ms. McKenzie.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. Sorry, I was just making notes. Thank you. Through you, Chair, it would make sense for us to sort of make it inclusive, because that the code of conduct would govern any kind of interaction that the board would be having. So certainly we can make that amendment to include all of that.
Other questions, comments? I had a couple actually. Forgive me, I haven't had a chance to take another look at the other code of conduct that we have, and I'm trying to recall if it actually applies to directors or not, or if it's only for employees, or if directors are considered quasi-employees of the corporation as well for the purposes of that code.
Believe, Chair, that this is the one that's specific to the board, and then that it's not you're not governed by the employee code of conduct.
Okay, because what I think what I was trying to sort of think about is some of the stuff I think that's in this policy is more related to the governance matters, and I was wondering if some of those sections might be more appropriate in the governance policy that we have, and whether or not then it would be more appropriate to actually have the code of conduct applying to the board members as well as to all LMCH parties, I guess we'll say, for lack of a better term. The reason I'm thinking that is because it's nice to have a sort of a smaller number of policies rather than having multiple numbers that it's actually covered in this one, not this one kind of thing. So I don't know if that's possible or appropriate, but I just want to put that out there for consideration.
Okay, well, certainly, Chair, I can take that back and take a look and see if that makes more sense to streamline, right? So to just have one formal code of conduct that governs everybody, and then to move some of this language into the governance, the board governance policy. I mean, that is one of the ones that that's also just going to be coming forward as well this evening. With the intention that a lot more work was going to happen with that one, and probably look to have that referred down to the board governance subcommittee, so that we can do some more work on that. I think there are a few pieces in the board governance and some of the appendices that will go with it that will make sense for us to review at the subcommittee level. Okay. So happy to take that piece on.
Sure. So that's just my thought. I don't know if others would hear that or think that the current structure makes a lot of sense too. I'm open to either, of course. Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. And through you, or to you actually, and I don't mean to be difficult, but I think that they're distinct. I don't know, and if it can be done, that's great, but it seems to me that the content is pretty specific just to directors. So I don't know if you're picturing it as like one section for directors and one section for employees, or you're hoping to see it all combined?
Yeah, I was thinking it all combined into one code. Because I would think that a number of the code matters would relate to directors as much as they would relate to employees. So that's just part of my thinking. But again, if it doesn't make sense, I'm good with that too. I just wanted to put it out for discussion. Ms. McKenzie, sorry, you had your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. All I was going to say is that if we do combine, what we would still look at is having a specific section that relates explicitly to the board members.
Mm. Yep. Any other thoughts on that? Is this worth the path going down, or should we just abandon it? Or Ms. Wilcox?
I think it's worth, through you, Chair, apologies. I think it's worth exploring, and maybe perhaps that's looking at other organizations to see what the practice is. I'm just doing a quick scan. It does look like there are pieces that are quite distinct to a board of directors. However, I think consistency between the two is really important. So yeah, that may, I'm be interested in what staff might bring back on that in terms of a recommendation.
Sure. Sorry for the child. Further comments, questions? No, seeing none. Okay, that's great. So anything further on the code policy? Sounds good. We'll move on to the next one then. The conflict of interest policy. Ms. Kenzie, over to you.
very much, through you, Chair. So the conflict of interest policy is going to be an important one for us to review in advance of the new board of directors being appointed. So staff have reviewed and signed off on this document. This is an all-encompassing document for staff as well as directors. Each staff member has had this reviewed and have to sign off as part of the onboarding when they are hired with us. And anytime there are any substantive changes to the policy, we also go back and do another sign off. So if you'd look to page 5, item number 3 is what I want to sort of bring to your attention. There are a couple of pieces that I'm just looking for a little bit of feedback. Item 3 talks about the fact that the board will review and sign off on this on an annual basis, and I have not done a review of other organizations, but that just seemed like it might. I just wanted to clarify whether or not the board felt that that was still appropriate, or if we should just be doing the one sign off with the expectation that the board would acknowledge the responsibility to disclose in writing on an ongoing basis versus having to bring all of the documents forward annually. So a little bit of feedback on that. Much of the rest of the policy is really governed by the housing division notice. So the HDN that's identified as one of the other documents, it speaks to all of the various pieces that we need to have in place and how the board is governed if there is a declaration of a conflict. So the shareholders agreement outlines the board compliance with all applicable conflict of interest law, speaks to the obligation of the board to ensure that LMCH employees comply. And the service manager can make a local rule. So much of this language, as I say, comes from the HDN. So we weren't looking to make any kind of significant changes, just really more around whether or not there's any thoughts about our being able to remove the piece about the annual and change it to sort of a mandatory reporting on behalf of the board.
Comments, questions related to that specific matter? Seeing that from my perspective, I think just doing it at the beginning of everyone's term and then having the expectation, obligation that reporting occurs when a conflict is entered into would be good.
Okay.
Perhaps there could be like midterm review or reminder related to conflict matters, but signing a form annually, I don't know if that might be overkill from my perspective. Mr. Nilsson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I was just maybe going to make a recommendation or a suggestion that if we have to review this every other year, that might be a time to sign it every other year.
Yeah.
And that's through you, Chair, again, right? That's part of the intent moving forward, is that it will be reviewed and updated biannually, and so it would make sense for the board to do it then if we haven't captured every, like, as we're looking at terms and the onboarding of new board members. We're gonna be doing it probably on an annual basis for a few years anyway, but then once we get it set in place, it would be good to just do it on a biannual. So I will make those changes to that policy, and we'll get ready to bring that one forward for approval, unless there's any other thoughts or concerns around the policy itself.
Anyone else? Yeah, sorry, any questions, comments related to the policy writ large then? The one thing I had is on page, first of all, I think the declaration forms are missing from the policy that are referenced. So just a flag. And on page 17 of the package, which is 5 of the policy, there's the notification to the city of a conflict. And I'm wondering just if that's part of that housing bulletin, and if that could be clarified. And I'm wondering then if it should, rather than saying, sorry, to the city, if it should be to the service manager then, just for clarification, who actually the conflict information be submitted to, because I think that'd be helpful to identify. Okay.
Through you, Chair. It is. So on that page, all of those pieces where the chair is it must notify, it indicates the city in writing. It should be we will change that to service manager, but that is part of the housing division notice that's identified. So it's housing division notice 2013-188.
Yep.
That is where all of the steps that are required for notice to the service manager. So we'll make that change as well.
Okay, that'd be great.
Good. Thank you. And we will include the forms when it comes forward for approval.
I think the
We'll
forms.
also, sorry, what did you say?
Forgive me. I think the forms are a good idea, so that's great. I like that concept.
All right. So if there's nothing else with that one, I think the next one that we had forward was just the statement of fiduciary responsibility. The only.
Sorry, I think the next one's the board governance policy.
Oh, is it? Okay, my apologies.
That's okay.
Maybe I'm jumping around. So board governance, little change here, right? It's a biannual review. The related documents have been updated. Updated to include references to the communications policy as well as the crisis communications policy. The board governance policy speaks to the board being responsible for board development as an effective team, including the ongoing evaluation of its performance and the recruitment of new directors. It also speaks to the clear feedback that's required annually to the CEO. So there's supposed to be an assessment and a review on an annual basis of the CEO. Part of what I wanted to bring forward here, just for discussion, is that if you turn to page 5, which would be 5 of 7, which is page 24 of the package, there's a section that specifically details the new director orientation process. And so I wanted to give primarily the entire board the opportunity to potentially comment here. I think some of this work is going to be impacted by some of the work that we're going to do in the board governance subcommittee. We are looking at the board handbook. We're looking at, we'll look at the evaluation forms as well as the evaluation policy piece. I think specifically the evaluation form should be updated to include some of the work that we're going to do in the guiding principles that we're establishing for the new board of directors and the matrix that we're going to develop for the board selection. So I wanted to just sort of highlight that area for the new directors and ask if there's any thoughts there or direction, or if you want to just as a group agree that we'll sort of bring this work forward to the subcommittee to manage and make recommendations back to the full board, if that makes sense.
Questions related to that specific matter? Ms. Wilcox.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. That I like that suggestion. That was one of the questions I had, is if this was something that was, we sort of speak to it, I think, in kind of the work plan for the subcommittee. So I think it would be helpful to line those things up and then bring it back.
Further questions, comments related to the specific matter? And to the policy generally? Ms. Wilcox.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I think to the policy generally, and this is something that hopefully we can deal with at the subcommittee, I think it'll be really important to maybe expand it a bit around those reference documents that are important for new directors and current directors to be aware of. So, and those are ones that we noted in the governance review. So specifically the shareholder agreement, being very, very familiar with that. And I think these are all part of the board handbook, but also the the terms of reference for the board being really key in setting out what the duties are. And I guess that sort of alludes to what duties may not be as well. So again, those are things we could probably deal with, but I think making that very specific would be helpful.
Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. I just had a question about section 7 under governance administration. So that's on page 7 of 7. Just at the end, sub B is record keeping, and it says that records are kept in accordance with the Business Corporations Act. I'm just wondering if the corporation is subject to MFIPA with respect to record keeping, and if there's a record retention policy, or if it is just strictly in accordance with the BCA.
Through the chair, yeah, through the chair, thank you. We are subject to MFIPA, and we do have a records retention policy in place that extends not just to our internal documents, but to our tenant files as well. There are obligations for us to keep any of those documents for a certain number of years, and that's all also identified in other housing division notices. But we are subject to MFIPA.
Further questions, comments?
Just a comment to follow up on that. I wonder if it might be worth noting that the records are kept in accordance with the record retention policy and not just the Business Corporations Act.
Yeah, happy to make that change.
Any other questions, comments? I wasn't able to access Teams to see if, I think we have a board meetings policy, do we not? Or is the governance policy generally covering off that? There's some reference to board meetings in here, but because I've got a follow-up question to that.
I believe there is a separate policy for board meetings and for the running of the board meetings themselves, separate and apart from this piece.
Okay, because I just wondered if in-camera criteria would make sense in this policy or in that policy. So, Mr. Leslie, hello. So if there's a policy related to that, then I think I'll reserve those comments for that policy then. So.
Okay.
Further questions, comments? All right, well, that's great. We'll next move on to the fiduciary statement of fiduciary responsibility. Ms. Mackenzie, over to you.
Thank you. Not proposing, thank you, through you, Chair. I'm not proposing any changes to this. I think that what I would like to see is that this document, it identifies that it's an appendix to Appendix A, but it doesn't really identify what it's an appendix to. So what I'm proposing is that we would attach this as an appendix to the conflict of interest. If you look at the bottom of the document, it indicates that the board members will adhere to both the code of conduct as well as conflict of interest guidelines, but I think we need to attach it to one policy in particular. So I'm just proposing that I would attach this as Appendix A to the conflict of interest policy, unless anybody believes that there's a reason to attach it potentially to both or have a preference one way or the other.
Thoughts on that? So for me, I think it sounds good with the conflict of interest policy, and I think it does make sense rather than just having a standalone. It's good to have it with a parent policy. You're right.
Yeah, it seemed to make sense to me because it actually, it's identifying that it's sort of in relation to all of the work of the board, that it be attached to at least one of the policies in particular. Okay, so I will take that one back. The last two, Chair, really, so this is on board evaluation policy and the board evaluation form. The board evaluation policy, if you look at on page 1, it speaks to the fact this is going to be a bit of a challenge for us this year. So looking for a little bit of feedback. The evaluations are supposed to take place on or before November 30th of each year, and to review how the board has done in the previous year and get some thoughts and feedback on ways to improve or communications, all of those pieces. I don't know if it would make sense for us to do this full piece or to have the board engage in this full piece in November of this year if the board may only be in place as of this summer. That seems a little bit quick. So I just didn't know if we should skip this year. I don't know, like, I identify that we're not going to do this work this year, but that we will do it next year, so that that's at least documented with that we've made a conscious decision. The board's made a decision to forego that piece for this year, because otherwise I don't know how we will. I don't know that there would be much value in doing it that quickly, to be honest with you. I think that I would anticipate that with a new board coming on, there still may be some learnings and some educational pieces that are happening. So to be able to evaluate themselves properly may be unfair that quickly. But what I'm suggesting for the two pieces, for the evaluation policy and then as well for the board evaluation form, is that these also would get approved or sent down to the subcommittee for review. I think that the board evaluation form in particular, some of the self-evaluation makes sense. Some of the criteria that they would be ranking themselves on, I think still has value. Some of the questions maybe are not really capturing some of the work that we're going to be doing with this subcommittee, right? I think that we need to look at incorporating some of the guiding principles again here. So some of the pieces around anti-racism, anti-oppression, and inclusion, and maybe some way to grade participation. I think that we also want to give people an opportunity, members of the board, to have an opportunity to self-identify if they feel that there are areas of weakness where they would prefer some additional training or support from either the board or from staff. We aren't really asking that currently. The closest we come to in this form is asking what steps each individual board member has taken to sort of educate themselves where they feel that they're lacking. But I think that it would be good in light of the new board starting that we take a different approach and ask what we can do to support the board members. Yeah. So if you're all right with that, then I would ask that we just, unless anybody has any specific comments they'd like to make now, I would ask that we just sort of refer this back down to subcommittee as well, and that we'll incorporate this work. Some of that is planned. We had articulated in the plan that Rosanna had shared with the board at the last meeting, and the schedule that we would do some of this work. But I think it's I think we'll get direction today that that's what we'll do and make that referral.
Great, thank you. Questions, comments related to that and feedback? Yes, Ms. Wilcox.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Just a couple of comments. So first on the proposal that we may not do this this year, given the new board, that makes sense. One thing I was wondering about those, would it be worth, maybe there's some, like a modified version of this that you almost treat as a pulse check with the new board and checking early on to see if there are items where additional training is sort of all the things that you had noted, Ms. Mackenzie. I think that's might be helpful to ensuring that individuals are feeling supported and can kind of identify needs early on. And then just in relation to, if it's okay to make a comment on some of the content of the policy. When I was reading through it, I was thinking around in terms of evaluation and looking at just the in the process section, right? And trying to think like what is the, and maybe this can be dealt with at the subcommittee, but where is the connection to the strategic plan? Because I'm trying to think where's a good measure of the success of a board, because it can tend to be pretty subjective. But if, and maybe this is, you know, there's opportunity to perhaps tie this to the new strategic plan in the future, but that there's kind of there's a correlation, right, between the performance of the board and those, pending what that new strat plan looks like, but it may have sort of outcomes that define what they're trying to achieve, and also metrics associated with that, and those may be good to gauge success in terms of strategic governance, and then the other components of how they're working together. And I do think, as was noted, there's some really important pieces around, you know, do all individual directors feel like they have an opportunity to share their voice, and is power shared, that kind of thing throughout the process.
Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. Just a question for staff through you. I'm wondering if there's magic to the September-October timeline, and whether instead of skipping the year, it makes sense to just change the timeline to later in the year, or if it needs to stay in September, October, because I agree that's probably too soon for the full evaluation, but I wonder, you know, January, if December, January makes more sense, and then just that's when it happens going forward, or whether September, October is important.
Ms. McKenzie.
Yeah, through you, Chair. The time frame, the September October, had been set up to take place in advance of elections for the coming year for the board. So it was to do a review, identify if there were any challenges, strengths, weaknesses of the board, but it was all to align with when elections were going to take place for the coming year. That's where that time frame came from. So that's the challenge. If we are just bringing a new board in, I'll use July as a target. So if the new board is coming in July, it may make more sense, as Ms. Wilcox was identifying, to do a pulse check. Maybe that's when we do the check-in and ask about whether or not there are additional pieces of training that any of the new members feel like they need, if we then want to try and keep on to the same cycle, so that we're doing the review in the fall.
Further questions, comments? So from my perspective, I fully agree with the suggestions that you had, Ms. McKenzie, and I think it'd be great to go back to the committee for a review of those items as well. I'd suggest that we actually maintain the timing as per the current policy, and I wouldn't think we'd actually look at suspending it now. I think it'd be nice to have the new board constituted, and then the new board can determine whether or not they wish to have the evaluation or not. It's unlikely that they would. And what I might suggest is that whoever the members of this board that are continuing on in the fall might bring forward a motion that, notwithstanding the policy, that the evaluation be deferred for 2020 or something like that to affect that change. I'm thinking that might be a helpful thing at that time, and that way we don't have to try to muck around with the policy for this unique circumstance that we're in. Mr. Milson.
Through you, Chair, through the staff, just wondering if it makes any sense for us as a board to do our own evaluation, if we could get that in for this year, and because we've been in here for almost a year now, so maybe some sort of a bit of an evaluation similar to this one. Would that be helpful, or I don't know?
Yeah, that's so. I don't know if it's fair to ask Ms. McKenzie.
Because I mean, the policy does say, on or like before November, so it can be before November, so it can be done at any time. But
yeah, it might actually be worth going through the existing framework to see how we find it to inform the revised framework that's going to come forward too. I'm thinking as well, though, that given that the majority of the board members won't be carrying forward with the new board, then the evaluation of performance and stuff like that, it's probably helpful for us just to have a discussion how we think we've done.
Mhm.
It might be helpful in providing information to the new board members, or sorry, the current board members that are carrying on going forward too. So I'm definitely open to that. I think that would be helpful as well.
Yeah.
It could be a scoped exercise given that this board is lapsing as a result, but
Yeah, I mean, I think we've made some different changes to the way the board used to work in terms of, even in the agenda, having consent items first and then, that kind of stuff, and changing the frequency of the financial reports to quarterly as opposed to monthly, those kind of things, and see how perhaps that's worked. Yeah.
that's a good point. Thoughts from the other members on that proposal then? I'm assuming then concurrence based on silence. So maybe we'll look at doing that then for perhaps, I don't know if May would be too aggressive for that, maybe June then, sort of as a capstone for when our term would be wrapping up, I guess. So sorry, Ms. Wilcox, you had your hand up.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So I was just running through timing in my head. So I'm also thinking that maybe works out well in terms of when the AGM is as well. It's typically in June, and I don't know how the two things relate in terms of maybe it's just inward facing in terms of a board, but then what components of that report out to the shareholder as part of that? Just sort of. I'm thinking out loud, I suppose, on that. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'm certainly not opposed to us undertaking that exercise. I do think it would be helpful in terms of if there's a requirement for all of us to provide feedback on the actual process itself. That would be really helpful, for that next board to have some feedback.
That's actually a really good suggestion. Ms. McKenzie and I have been talking a bit about the AGM and what the content might be. And it's a good point because the shareholder might be asking specifically for sort of a report on our experience and performance as the board as one of the key items for 2020 and carrying forward into 2021. So it might be helpful to highlight some of those things in the AGM as well. That's a really good idea. Ms. McKenzie, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that as well.
Sorry, I thought I was muted there. My apologies. No, I think it's probably a good opportunity. I think it would make sense for this board to provide some feedback back to council, right, about what the experience has been like for the board and in preparation for the new board starting. I think that the AGM, I think that the target is June 23rd. Okay. So that did you want to look at doing some type of review in advance of that just for the existing board members? And is that something that you need staff to assist with?
Why don't I take that back on behalf of the board
Okay.
to take that and provide you with some feedback on if everyone's comfortable with that. I'll look to action Mr. Milson's suggestion, which everyone is in concurrence with. So okay, good points. Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. Any other further items related to the board evaluation policy and the board evaluation form, recognizing that those will be going to the subcommittee and returning to us at a later date? Seeing none, that sounds great. I think that works.
Good. I think that's it.
So that brings us to the end of our committee of the whole meeting. We are about 15 minutes late. My apologies for that to everyone that's listening on the live stream. We will be adjourning as committee and returning as the full board for our formal meeting shortly. So with that, could I have a motion to adjourn committee of the whole?